Allah is not exposing anyone. He is uncovering truth, gently, wisely, and exactly on time. What they are beginning to feel now is not regret caused by you. It is clarity sent by Allah, because when sincerity leaves a place, its absence becomes louder than its presence ever was. And what they are realizing now is who you truly were and who they lost. This moment is not about revenge, because revenge is loud and rushed, and Allah does not operate in noise. What is happening now is quieter than anger and deeper than justice. It is truth being allowed to surface at its own pace. Revelation is never forced. It arrives when the heart is finally still enough to recognize it. And Allah chooses the timing carefully, because truth spoken too early is often rejected. You did not ask Allah to prove anything on your behalf. You simply asked Him to protect your heart. And sometimes protection does not look like comfort. Sometimes it looks like removal. Allah did not expose anyone through words or confrontation. He exposed reality by letting absence speak where presence was once ignored. Revenge seeks to hurt. Revelation seeks to clarify. Allah is not interested in embarrassing anyone, but He is deeply concerned with restoring balance. When sincerity is taken for granted, Allah does not argue on your behalf. He steps back and allows life to teach the lesson that words could never deliver. This is why it feels slow. This is why it feels delayed. Because Allah is not reacting to emotion. He is guiding understanding. And understanding that comes through experience lasts longer than understanding that comes through explanation. When you were there, your patience blended into the background. Your forgiveness felt endless. Your loyalty felt ordinary. So it was consumed without gratitude. Allah allowed that comfort to disappear, so its value could finally be measured. What is being revealed now is not your importance to them, but their blindness to it. Allah does not need to announce your worth. He allows the emptiness left behind to do that work quietly, deeply, and without drama. Revenge would have rushed the ending. Revelation lets the realization mature. Allah allows time to pass, so the heart cannot blame emotion, circumstances, or confusion. Only truth remains when excuses are exhausted. This is why you were asked to stay silent. Not because your story did not matter, but because Allah wanted to tell it Himself. Silence under injustice is not weakness when Allah is the one responding for you. Allah knows that explanations often comfort the ego, but rarely transform the heart. So instead of giving them your words, He gave them space. And space has a way of teaching what presence once softened. You were not removed to teach them a lesson. You were removed to save your sincerity from being damaged further. Revelation always protects the innocent before it corrects the negligent. What they are realizing now did not come from missing you emotionally. It came from recognizing what is no longer present in their life. The peace, the consistency, the quiet care that never demanded credit. Allah allows the heart to feel the contrast, before and after, with you and without you. This contrast is revelation. It strips denial and leaves only awareness. Revenge would have demanded acknowledgement. Revelation does not need it. Whether they admit it or not, the realization still settles. Allah does not require public regret for private truth to take root. You may never hear them say it. You may never receive an apology. But revelation does not depend on closure. It depends on certainty. And Allah ensures that certainty reaches the heart that once benefited from your presence. This is why you must not return to old explanations or reopen closed doors. Revelation finishes its work only when boundaries remain intact. Allah is teaching you as much as He is teaching them. You are learning that being misunderstood did not mean you were unclear. It meant the listener was not ready. Allah does not punish sincere hearts for being early. He simply moves them to safer ground. Revenge feeds the ego. Revelation heals the soul. Allah chose healing for you, not satisfaction. And healing often arrives disguised as distance. What is unfolding now is not something you need to watch or monitor. Revelation does not require your attention. It only requires your trust that Allah sees every quiet sacrifice that was never acknowledged. You were never meant to prove your worth to someone who benefited from it freely. Allah is correcting that imbalance by removing access, not by creating conflict. Let them understand slowly. Let them sit with the silence. Allah is far more effective than confrontation, and His lessons leave no room for argument. This is not revenge. This is revelation, and revelation always arrives with peace for the one who remained sincere. When you were present, your efforts blended into the background of their life. Familiarity softened the impact of your sincerity. What was consistent became invisible. Allah allows this blindness sometimes, not as approval, but as a test of appreciation. Your kindness did not announce itself, so it was mistaken for something that would never end. Your patience did not complain, so it was assumed to be effortless. And your loyalty did not threaten to leave, so it was treated as permanent. Some hearts only recognize value when it is no longer accessible. While you were there, they were comfortable. Comfort dulls perception. Allah removed comfort so clarity could return. You were not unseen because you lacked worth. You were unseen because your presence was gentle, not demanding. And gentleness is often overlooked by hearts that confuse intensity with importance. Allah allows people to misjudge blessings when those blessings are quietly reliable. The test is not whether the blessing exists, but whether it is honored while it remains. When you stayed, they did not have to imagine life without you. So they never learned what you were preventing. They never saw the burdens you absorbed. They never noticed the peace you maintained. Your presence became part of their normal, not their miracle. And miracles are only recognized when they disappear. Allah removed the miracle so its absence could speak. They did not ignore you intentionally. They simply grew accustomed to being held without effort. And Allah does not allow sincere hearts to be reduced to background support forever. What they are realizing now is not that you were perfect, but that you were consistent. And consistency is rare in a world that celebrates excitement over stability. Allah allows absence to sharpen vision. Distance removes distraction. When noise fades, the heart finally reviews what it once rushed past. You were carrying weight quietly. And because you carried it well, they assumed it was light. Allah removed you so the weight could finally be felt. This is why the realization feels delayed. It did not come from memory. It came from contrast. From experiencing life without the calm you provided, they are now noticing the gaps. The silence where reassurance used to live. The tension where patience once stood guard. These gaps are not punishments. They are revelations. Allah did not take you away to create longing. He took you away to create understanding. Longing fades. Understanding lasts. When you were there, they did not have to grow. You compensated, you adjusted, you softened. Allah removed you so growth could no longer be avoided. This is not about regret for losing you. It is about recognizing the kind of presence they were given and did not protect. Allah teaches this lesson gently but firmly. You were a steady light, not a flashing one. And some eyes are trained only to notice brightness, not guidance. Allah changed the darkness so the light could finally be remembered. Their realization now is quieter than their neglect was. And that is intentional. Allah does not mirror behavior. He corrects it. You do not need them to see you now. You needed Allah to remove you then. And He did, at the exact moment your sincerity was at risk of being diminished further. This section of your story is not about being missed. It is about being understood too late. And Allah allows that timing because it protects your future peace. What they couldn't see while you were there, they now feel without you. And that feeling is the lesson Allah wanted to teach. Allah did not remove you suddenly or carelessly. He watched patiently as your sincerity was stretched, as your kindness was assumed, as your presence became expected instead of appreciated. And when the weight on your heart grew heavier than the peace it brought, Allah intervened quietly. Your dignity was never meant to be negotiated. But slowly, without you realizing it, you were explaining yourself too often, forgiving too easily, and making room where there should have been respect. Allah does not allow sincere hearts to shrink themselves just to be accepted. Removal is not rejection when it comes from Allah. It is protection. Protection from being misunderstood again. Protection from overgiving. Protection from staying in a place where your value must constantly be proven. Allah saw how much you were carrying in silence. He saw the moments you questioned yourself instead of questioning the situation. And when confusion began to replace clarity in your heart, Allah chose distance as mercy. You were not taken away because you were weak. You were taken away because your softness was being misused. Allah does not punish gentle hearts for being gentle. He shields them when the environment becomes unsafe. Your dignity matters to Allah more than your attachment. Even if you were willing to endure imbalance, Allah was not willing to let it continue. So He closed the door you kept hoping would soften on its own. Sometimes Allah removes us from a place not because it is harmful in obvious ways, but because it is slowly teaching us to tolerate what we should never normalize. And Allah refuses to let dignity erode quietly. You were beginning to accept less than you deserved. Not because you believed you deserved less, but because you believed patience meant endurance without limits. Allah teaches patience with boundaries, not self-erasure. The separation was not meant to create pain, it was meant to restore proportion. To remind your heart that love does not require constant sacrifice of self. That sincerity should not cost you peace. Allah protected you from becoming someone who stays silent while being diminished. From becoming someone who keeps giving while receiving uncertainty. From becoming someone who confuses tolerance with virtue. Your removal was timed perfectly. Not when you were exhausted beyond repair, but when you were still capable of healing fully. Allah intervenes before the damage becomes permanent. Dignity is quiet. It does not argue. It does not threaten. It simply steps away when the balance is broken. Allah guided your steps away because He values what your heart carries. You may have wondered why things ended without closure. But closure often invites justification. Allah did not want excuses to soften the truth. He wanted clarity to settle without resistance. By removing you, Allah also removed the role you were playing in maintaining imbalance. Without your constant adjustment, reality could finally stand on its own. This was not punishment for anyone. It was alignment. Allah realigned you with environments that would not require you to explain your worth or negotiate your needs. Your dignity is not arrogance, it is self-respect rooted in faith. Allah does not let faith grow in places where humility turns into self-neglect. You were protected from returning again and again, hoping for change while losing parts of yourself each time. Allah closed the path so your heart could finally rest. This distance is teaching you how peace feels when it is not conditional. How relief arrives when you no longer have to perform emotional labor to be understood. Allah did not remove you to make you lonely. He removed you to make you whole again. And wholeness always begins with boundaries. What was taken from you was not a relationship. It was a burden disguised as connection. Allah lifted it because your dignity mattered too much to Him. This removal was not an ending. It was a rescue. And Allah only rescues what He intends to preserve. Silence was not weakness in your story, it was trust. You did not stop speaking because you had nothing to say. You stopped because Allah asked you to step back and let Him handle what words could no longer repair. There comes a point where explaining yourself no longer brings clarity. It only invites debate. Allah removes your voice from the conversation so He can replace it with truth that cannot be argued against. You could have defended your intentions. You could have reminded them of your sacrifices. But Allah knew that your words would be filtered through emotion, while His actions would be felt through reality. Silence under misunderstanding is heavy. It tests the ego and humbles the heart. But Allah does not ask His servants to remain silent unless He intends to speak in a way that settles matters fully. When you stopped reacting, Allah started revealing. When you stopped correcting narratives, Allah allowed outcomes to correct them instead. This is the power of divine timing. Silence protects dignity when speech would have turned into pleading. Allah preserved your honor by closing your mouth before your heart could be exposed to further harm. You were not silent because you were unsure. You were silent because you were secure enough to let Allah handle what was beyond your control. This kind of silence is not absence, it is reliance. Allah knows that some hearts listen only to consequences, not explanations. So He allowed silence to become the space where realization could finally enter. Your silence confused them at first. They expected reaction, they expected pursuit. But Allah replaced your response with stillness, and stillness unsettles those who relied on noise. You may have felt invisible during that quiet period, but Allah was arranging clarity behind the scenes. Silence often feels like abandonment until its outcome appears. By remaining silent, you stepped out of emotional chaos. You refused to fight for a place that required constant justification. Allah honored that restraint by speaking on your behalf. Allah does not raise voices. He raises outcomes. And outcomes speak in a language that cannot be interrupted, denied, or reframed. Your silence allowed space for reflection. Without your presence softening the truth, reality stood exposed. And reality is a far more effective teacher than argument. Silence also healed you. It broke the habit of seeking validation from someone who could not offer it consistently. Allah used quiet to detach your heart gently. You learned that not every misunderstanding needs correction. Some misunderstandings are meant to age into clarity. Allah allows time to do what urgency cannot. Your silence was not an ending. It was a pause before revelation. Allah does not rush conclusions. He allows them to unfold where they cannot be resisted. You were spared the exhaustion of repeating yourself. Allah knew how draining it had become to explain your intentions to someone who benefited from them. Silence was Allah's way of saying, enough. Enough explaining, enough proving, enough shrinking yourself to be heard. In that quiet, Allah rewrote the narrative without your involvement. And when the truth appeared, it arrived with weight, not emotion. You no longer needed to be understood by them. You needed to be protected by Allah. And He chose silence as the shield. This silence was not empty. It was full of divine work. And when Allah speaks through outcomes, there is nothing left to say. What they are facing now is not caused by you. It is not something you set in motion intentionally. These are consequences unfolding naturally once your presence was removed. Allah did not assign you the role of teacher through pain. He assigned life itself to complete the lesson. You walked away without revenge, without damage, without wishing harm. And because of that, what followed cannot be blamed on bitterness. It is clarity arriving without interference. Allah allows consequences to emerge when sincerity is no longer cushioning reality. While you were there, you absorbed discomfort quietly. You softened moments that should have been felt fully. You filled emotional gaps without announcing the effort. Now that support is gone, and the weight is being felt for the first time. They are not suffering because you left. They are adjusting to a reality that was previously balanced by your patience. Allah removed the balance you provided, so they could experience what was always present, but never acknowledged. This is why you feel strangely calm now. You are no longer carrying outcomes that were never yours to manage. Allah returned responsibility to its rightful place, and with that return came relief. Consequences are not punishments when they come from Allah. They are corrections. They realign perception with truth, and truth is often uncomfortable only because it was delayed. What they are encountering now is the absence of consistency, the silence where reassurance once lived, the uncertainty where stability once stood quietly. These are not wounds you caused. These are gaps revealed. Allah did not make them miss you emotionally. He made them notice what life feels like without the peace you provided. Missing fades. Awareness remains. You are not responsible for the discomfort that followed your departure. You are responsible only for the dignity with which you left. Allah handled the rest. Consequences teach without accusation. They do not raise voices or demand apologies. They simply repeat the lesson until understanding settles. Allah chose this path because it cannot be resisted. While you were there, they could ignore patterns because you compensated for them. Now those patterns stand alone. Allah allows this so growth can occur without dependence. You do not need to explain what you gave. Life is now explaining it more clearly than words ever could. And life does not exaggerate. This stage may feel unsettling if you still carry empathy. You may wonder if you were too firm, too distant, too final. But Allah does not allow sincere hearts to harm through obedience. Consequences are not meant to bring you satisfaction. They are meant to bring balance. And Allah protected your heart by separating you from the unfolding lesson. What they are meeting now is not your absence alone. It is the accumulation of moments they dismissed, delayed, or overlooked. Allah allowed those moments to return quietly. You were not meant to stay and absorb the cost of someone else's growth. Allah removed you so learning could happen without further sacrifice from you. This is why returning would interrupt the lesson. Allah does not correct halfway. He completes what He begins. And He began this with separation for a reason. Your peace now is evidence that this was necessary. Consequences bring rest to the one who carried too much for too long. Allah lifted that weight intentionally. They may not recognize the lesson immediately. They may frame it differently in their mind. But Allah ensures that truth reaches the heart in a form it cannot escape. You are no longer part of the equation. And that is the mercy. Allah removed you from responsibility without removing your worth. What unfolds from here does not require your attention. Consequences do not need witnesses. Allah oversees them completely. This chapter is not about what they lost. It is about what you were spared from carrying any longer. And Allah never removes weight without replacing it with peace. What departed from their life was not merely a presence or a name. It was a mercy that moved quietly, doing its work without demanding recognition. Allah often sends mercy in human form, wrapped in patience, concern, and restraint. When that mercy leaves, the space it occupied begins to speak. You were a mercy because you brought calm where there could have been chaos. You chose understanding where there could have been argument. Allah places such mercy gently, and when it is not honored, He retrieves it without announcement. They may think they lost companionship. In reality, they lost protection they never noticed. They lost prayers whispered when no one was watching. They lost care that operated even when appreciation was absent. Mercy does not keep count. It does not remind. It does not threaten to leave. That is why it is often misunderstood. Allah allows that misunderstanding until it becomes clear through absence. While you were there, certain difficulties never reached them fully. Certain consequences never landed. Certain moments were softened before they could wound. That was mercy working quietly in the background. Allah does not allow mercy to be depleted through neglect. when its presence begins to be assumed rather than honored, Allah moves it to a place where it will be valued without explanation. What they are feeling now is not longing for you as a person. It is the unfamiliar weight of facing life without gentle buffering, without someone absorbing tension before it escalates. You were a mercy because you gave without conditions. You showed up without keeping score. And Allah knows that such giving, when ignored, can slowly harm the giver. This is why Allah removed you before bitterness could enter your heart. Mercy must remain pure to remain mercy. Allah preserves what He sends. They may not recognize it immediately. Mercy is subtle. It reveals itself most clearly after it is gone. And Allah allows that realization to arrive slowly, without accusation. You were mercy because you brought sincerity into ordinary moments. You cared when it was inconvenient. You stayed when it was easier to withdraw. Allah counts those moments even when people do not. What left them was not comfort alone. It was a layer of safety they did not know how to protect. Allah does not allow mercy to remain where it is taken for granted. This is not meant to create guilt in them or pride in you. Mercy is not about comparison. It is about balance. And Allah restored balance by relocating what was gentle. You may feel sadness knowing they did not recognize it in time. That sadness is natural, but Allah did not leave the outcome to chance. He intervened to preserve your heart. Mercy is never wasted. It does not disappear. Allah redirects it, and wherever it lands next, it arrives with wisdom, shaped by what it endured. They are now learning the difference between attention and care, between presence and protection. These lessons come quietly, without your involvement. Allah allowed mercy to leave, so it would no longer be consumed without gratitude. This departure is not punishment, it is correction. You are not meant to return as mercy to a place that did not safeguard it. Allah teaches that mercy has boundaries, even when it is sincere. What you carried was sacred. Allah treated it as such, and that is why it was removed gently, not broken publicly. This chapter teaches you something as well, that what you gave was real, that it mattered, and that Allah saw it clearly, even when others did not. What left them was not a person, it was a mercy. And Allah never allows mercy to be lost, only moved. Before you close this video, let your heart rest for a moment. Not because everything is suddenly easy, but because everything is finally clear. You were not forgotten by Allah. You were not overlooked. You were never invisible to Him, even when you felt unseen by others. What left your life was not taken to punish you. It was removed to protect what remained inside you. Your sincerity, your dignity, your ability to love without losing yourself. If they are realizing your value now, let that realization stay with them. You do not need to return to be validated. Allah has already settled the truth in the only place that matters. Your chapter with them ended quietly because loud endings invite regret. But quiet endings invite peace. And peace is what Allah promises to hearts that trust Him even when it hurts. You are not behind. You are not late. You are exactly where Allah can finally give you what fits you. So, leave this message with calm, not questions, with trust, not tension, because what Allah removes with wisdom is always replaced with something that arrives gently and stays.